Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So what if I told you that we were sent to kill the Taken King by Eris, but it was also part of someone else's plans? Or at very least, that it unfolded from a series of events that worked out well for another person. In this instance, I am not referring to Mara Sov, whose plans hinged upon our own, or to Toland the Shattered, who, opportunistically of course, would have loved to take some advantage from our different conquests on the Dreadnought. No, this time it relates to one of the other Hive gods, and astoundingly enough, it isn't Savathûn, it's Xivu Arath. This has nothing to do with Oryx's plans either, of course. It has nothing to do with the Touch of Malice, and nothing to do with the long series of events that was conducted by Crota. It is closely linked to Crota, but I think it's a really important set of events in the story to understand because it changes the context of literally everything to do with the downfall of Oryx, and it puts it in a better piece of context and tells us, hey, the Hive gods were always fighting with each other at a certain point, and someone was trying to cause his downfall the whole time. Also, from the most surface level of things, it explains why in the Dark Below expansion, literally 8 years ago, we fought Crota in a large Hive crystal, as opposed to in his real physical form that we found in the raid. This changing context is important, but more importantly it tells us about the ultimate revenge of Oryx's sister, Xivu Arath, the god of war. But first, a word from our sponsors at Outplayed. Gameplay capture has just gotten that much easier, as has sharing those amazing moments online, as has editing them down to cut out all the filler. How would you do all of that? All of it can be done with one single tool, Outplayed. It supports over 300 games, including Destiny 2, and you can download Outplayed at the link in the description for free today. Thanks so much to Outplayed for sponsoring this video. Anyway, back to the lore. So, let's talk a little about the circumstances under which Xivu and Oryx were last interacting. Long story short, it occurs at a crucial moment within the Books of Sorrow, and it's the moment at which the three Hive gods began to split. This sundering of the broods is a crucial moment because it represents the moment where cooperation and violence, as was typical for the Hive, turned into competition and violence, as was somewhat atypical. This is a moment where the Hive were invading a system which contains a black hole. There was a civilization built up around this black hole called the Harmony, and the black hole had been artificially stabilized and maintained by the Traveler, allowing the Harmony to develop 10 planets within its orbit. The Harmony also had a miraculous construct of light, which the black hole had contained. It was called the Giftmast, and the Hive were intending to devour it. This is the moment at which friendly love and war between the Hive broods really broke off. It's the moment of a great split and sundering, and it really is important to understand that this split here has huge consequences for the later story. Take a listen to the excerpt from the Books of Sorrow as to what happened. The Giftmast. It towers above this system like a monument to treason. It beams with silver light. It sings a radio lullaby, made of soothing lies. In its light live the Harmony, and they are now our prey. Now arrives Xivu Arath at the head of her armada. She fights the Harmony for 50 years with strategies and discipline, but the Harmony turn to the Wish Dragons, and their wishful bishops wrestle Xivu in the Ascendant Plane. Xivu falls into deadlock. Next arrives Savathûn, flanked by her chorus and her celebrants. They trick their way onto Anaharmony in disguises so that they might vivisect these dragons. The Wormar god laughs and laughs. For 100 years, Savathûn keeps secret covens among the Harmony. But first of all was Oryx, whose brood grew in secret places in the rubble of the accretion disk. The first navigator sends rocks and comets to crash into the Harmony worlds so that the Harmony fleet will be disarrayed. he sends seeders to infiltrate the Harmony Worlds with his broods. Here, at the center of the 5th book, the Hive has grown so mighty that it has made annihilation of all false life routine. Xivu Arath kills the wishful bishops, and Savathun achieves some secret purpose, and Oryx's court tears down the Giftmast. The Harmony people wail in terror, and they throw themselves into the silver lakes of Anaharmony to drown. "Come," saith Oryx, "eat of the Giftmast, for I am a generous god. Of its pieces I claim only 2 out of every 5. The mast is full of the light of the traveller. It is full of the marrow taste of the sky. All who eat of it are filled with the ecstatic certainty that they serve a great and necessary purpose." Then saith Savathun, "Siblings, listen. We must part ways a while, so that we may grow different." She flies her war moons into the black hole. Her throne becomes distant. Saith Xivu Arath, "King Oryx, you take up too much space. Your power constrains too many choices. I must go away from you." She flies her war moons away into the night. Her throne is barred shut. Then Oryx was alone. He spent a while in thought, and those thoughts are recorded here. This is the crucial moment of the story of the Hive, as it's when the fates of the Hive gods really started to become competitive with each other, as opposed to cooperative. They fought and killed each other previously, but they fought alongside each other. Their greater priority in such wars was not to dominate the others and to prevent them from ever achieving strength. It was to achieve dominance amongst the trio, of course, but it was never openly hostile. In this strange way, removing themselves from the conflict that Oryx had enacted was a way of Xivu Arath and Savathun declaring hostility. It was something that meant that they were no longer looking to be cooperative. They were no longer working to become stronger together. They desired power in a different manner. However, after this split between the broods, the competition between them clearly became fiercer, and there were greater notions of actual hostility. And so, different Hive Knights and different Ascendants started making their moves. It's in these moments that we see everything start to unfold. This lore, however, is something that we got very late in the day. This was only revealed to us back in Shadowkeep, and I've always been waiting for an appropriate time to cover it. And now is as good a time as any. This was from the Dust Bungie.net lore entry. This was the result of the rivalry born out of a moment which could only have happened thanks to the sundering of the broods at the Giftmast. This is a rivalry between 2 knights and 2 siblings, clearly bound in opposition, trying to discover strength. It reads as follows. "Fill up your mouths. We fill them with dust. Let us remember the great feats of our king. In dust they are spoken. In dust of our skin." One day, as the green eye stars set behind the faraway spines left by the machine's failed injections, a knight of Oryx met a knight of Xivu Arath as they passed across a bridge in the Sea of Screams. To their north lay a strata of ossified corpses, tangled bones left by newborn beings who had hatched into this overworld from the weeping, blistered souls of living worlds at the end of their sanity, only to become unanchored from the universe of matter and confuse their shapes with each other, until they became one screaming interchange of bodies and died. To their other north was an atoll of scriptures adrift on a sea of interpretations, gnawed at by heresies like white eels. To another north was one end of the bridge, and to the last north, the other end. All directions were north, but it was not at once obvious which lay at the northernmost place. North is towards Oryx, my king, said the first knight. No, said the second knight. Xivu-Arath is victorious in all wars. North is toward my queen. Thus announced, they drew their blades and struggled. At first the knight of Xivu-Arath, she whose victory is idempotent, had the upper claw. Through inexorable campaigns and the absolute mastery of operontological warfare, which is the method of war which converts mere strategy into an attack on the enemy's very fundamental modes of being and knowing, Xivu-Arath had claimed great swaths of Oryx's territory. But then, the Knight of Oryx, first navigator of phase spaces, primogenitor of possibilities, gained the poise and the momentum. For Oryx was ever exploring and opening new spaces, and all that he discovered weighed more on his existence than all he had ever known and left behind. At last, battered like primordial worlds, their shields broken and their thick slabs of health eroded, they toppled in exhaustion, but each had one more way to fight, by the claim of truth. Xivu-Arath is more powerful, her knight claimed, for she held a territory in Oryx's mind even after she died. Oryx is more powerful, his knight retorted, for he has gone into the deep. Alone of all the hive, he has spoken to that which is caustic to existence, and returned with some loan of its power. He has even relaxed in its presence, for he is friend to that which cannot be friend. Perhaps the knight's weapon had cut through the thin membranes of reality and drawn a tear of prophecy from the eye of time, which fell into the knight's panting mouth. For the knight then said, "And my king is so mighty in his weight of causality, that all which succeeds him is in some way caused by him. Even his enemies, in reacting to him, ultimately obey the shape of his will, as a bandage must obey the shape of a wounded limb. So it is that the one who most hates and fears my king will also be the one to find what he seeks. It is this way, only because it must be this way. Ayat." Now the other knight knew the sound of Holy Writ, but could not surrender the fight. Yes, Oryx was first to know the deep, the Knight of Xivu-Arath said. But first blood is not last blood. First to meet the Shape of Shapes is not the last to touch that secret face. Easy it may be to dismiss my queen for her blunt strength and simplicity, but she causes exhaustion and ennui in her enemies, which, in a cosmos where existence may be maintained by will alone, are the surest of killers. And, as for your prophecy, I need not disprove it. For until it is true, it is only a boast. Now neither knight had died, and so they knew that they had fought to an impasse. So they cast themselves from the bridge into the sea of screams below, to see where the currents would bear them. For this reason, a certain quantity of tribute did not reach one of Crota's champions at the necessary time, and that champion lost a duel with a sergeant of Xivu-Arath, causing the loss of a great number of temples and tributaries, so that Crota, upon slaughtering many liars with his sword, judged it best to sleep and recover his debts, with his soul proxied in a material cask so that he could use it as a pittance to return swiftly to the real. All afterwards proceeded as it must have proceeded. Ayat. From this moment, the chain of causality continues as follows. Crota, in his weakened form, was bound to the crystal in the Hellmouth. This was assaulted and destroyed by the Guardians. These same Guardians went forth into his throne world and killed him for good. This weakened Oryx's tribute and forced the Taken King to extend his forces into Sol and beat back the Guardians. Overextended, we then went to kill Oryx's other sources of tribute, from his shades to his high war, to the very daughters that followed him, the war priest that exalted him, and Golgoroth that festered at his side. And from there, we killed the Taken King too, breaking his hold on our system. From here, we destroyed our enemy and smote his ruin upon the rings of Saturn. We may have been the weapon that killed Oryx, and Eris might have been his executioner. But imagine how ironic it is that the least spoken of sister, the one that many dismiss as weakest amongst the three, which I believe to be a mistake, was in fact one of the ones that may well have escorted the Taken King to the chopping block. The two knights that met across the bridge is a tale that could be allegory, but it probably isn't. It's probably a means by which Xivu knew that she would be able to enact enough violence and enough harm to Oryx to lead to his death. From said death, she could gain terrible power, not only as the last of the hive gods amongst the swarms, now that Savathun has forsaken the power of the Witness and has also died within her own throne world, albeit perhaps temporarily, but also because she has now enacted the prophecy the knight spoke of. She has looked upon the face of the Witness and serves it still. We may have been there as Oryx fell, but oftentimes we need to ask the question of who that falling king really left as the beneficiary of his kingdom. Xivu, the ascendant god of war, may well be the greatest beneficiary of his death. All of this may even have been a part of her plan. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was also interesting, because for me this was a piece of context that really added some important clarity to the entirety of the story of Oryx's fall, and I'm so glad I got to finally cover it. I missed it in the initial release around Shadowkeep, and I thought that it was so important to cover because, well, if you take a look at all of this lore, it really tells us about the reasons why we were even able to start the destruction of Oryx's family in the first place. This is the prelude, effectively, to the entirety of the Dark Below expansion, which of course then links onto the Taken King expansion, and even now, down the line, has ripples that affect Witch Queen. So it's a very important event in history, and understanding it really helps us know the power of Xivu as well. If you thought that was interesting, again, go ahead and let me know in the comments section, and if you have any more thoughts, you can leave them there too. If you want to see more Destiny content, including more stuff around the Kingsfall raid, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Parodacia Arastra. I'll see you, Starside.